So good morning. I have the pleasure of, so for you that don't know me, my name is David Garza. I'm the director of the wastewater system here at McAllen Public Utilities. It's been a pleasure working here for all this time that I've been here for the last 8 years. But I have a better and more privileged pleasure in introducing our general manager for McAllen Public Utilities, who's been in the business as long, probably a little bit longer than me, but has been with McAllen for over 25 years. So, and it says a lot. That says a lot of testimony to what we do here and why I say it's a privilege coming and working for McAllen. It was his vision that started this. He basically tasked us with it. And so he allows us to do that, and then we end up taking it. And because of him, we're allowed to do this. And this is the second year, and as mentioned, that second year has grown tremendously. And we keep hoping that it continues to grow because we truly believe the Valley needs this. We truly believe that we can make this, maybe not as big as Texas Water, but maybe a mini Texas Water, to end up giving all those that cannot go to Texas Water to have something here for themselves here at the Rio Grande Valley. That's what we want to do. That's why we call it the Rio Grande Valley Utility Conference, because that's what we wanted to end up doing. It's for all of us that have attended here today. It's for you all. So we truly appreciate it. And again, I can't thank enough to our exhibitors and sponsors. So with that introduction, I want to end up bringing up our general manager, our professional engineer, Mark Vega.
Thank you all so much for being here in a beautiful morning. Everybody hear me in the back? And you know you're at a utility conference when you see a cone in the back of the truck? Who did that? I mean, come on, guys. I said Brownsville. Where's Brownsville? But that's how you know they take their policy seriously, right? Even at the conference, they put a cone behind the truck. Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. I know David already recognized and thanked our sponsors. Thank you, sponsors. Without you, this doesn't happen. This is only our second year, and we're so excited because it's much larger than the first one. And I've got to thank our staff, starting with David Garza, and so many that worked on this. I did not lift a finger to put this conference together. Our staff just did an incredible job. So I want to give them a round of applause for all of our staff. I just saw CDBG walk in. If CDBG assists your communities, I know there's a lot of private folks here, but even the communities, thank them. They've helped us with probably a few $1 million in water and sewer line replacements. Raise your hands out there, Julie and Priscilla. Thank you guys so much for what you all do for utilities. Thank you. So in a bit, I will be introducing our stellar city commissioner, Sebi Haddad, District 5, who's my commissioner from my district. But we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have an invocation. So if you could please rise for the pledge. And it's kind of like the national anthem. I was thinking, what are the words again? But, okay, do we have a flag? Okay. We're going to point north. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Please remain standing. Father God, thank you so much for this morning. Father, for all the men and women that are here that represent their communities, their companies, I pray your blessings on them, on their families, on their children, Father, their spouses, their companies. Thank you for the opportunity to serve people, to serve our community. It's such a privilege and an honor. Father, many do not have that privilege and the skills and the abilities to do that. You've given us that, Father. I pray that we appreciate that, we appreciate to live in this great country and in the greatest state, in the greatest country in the world. Thank you for your blessings for us, Father, which many we don't even think about, doesn't even cross our minds. Thank you for this time. Bless this conference. Bless everyone, God, that prepared all of this for all of us. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Again, I introduce Commissioner. Yes, sit down. Have a seat, please. I'll introduce our first speaker to give some welcoming remarks, and that is our Commissioner for City of McAllen for District 5, Mr. Sebi Haddad.
Good morning, good morning. So it is an honor to join everybody here today as we kick off the second annual Rio Grande Valley Utility Conference right here in the great city of McAllen. First, I do want to extend my sincere thanks to the McAllen Public Utility team and Mark for their vision, leadership, and collaboration in making this conference possible. Bringing together experts, innovators, and leaders from across the Rio Grande Valley is no small task, and their commitment ensures that our region continues to grow stronger, smarter, and more connected. Over the next 3 days, you'll explore a wide range of topics from potable water and wastewater management to infrastructure modernization, cybersecurity, emergency preparedness, and workforce development. Each of these areas is critical, not just for the future of our utilities, but for the families and communities who depend on us every single day and that we represent. Conferences like this are invaluable to our community. They allow us to share best practices, strengthen regional partnerships, and prepare for the challenges ahead from managing rapid population growth and water scarcity to adapting to environmental changes and emerging technologies. These conversations directly shape how we build resilient systems that safeguard our resources, support economic development, and improve quality of life for every resident in our cities within our region. As we continue to expand, so does our responsibility to plan wisely, invest in innovation, and protect the natural assets that sustain us. That's why gatherings like this are very important. They're not just about policy or practice, they're about preserving our future and ensuring that every home, business, and family has access to safe, reliable, and sustainable utility services. On behalf of the City of McAllen, I want to thank each of you for your dedication to public service. Your work is vital to the prosperity of South Texas, and together we are truly building a brighter Rio Grande Valley. And so I really want to thank you. And on behalf of the mayor, who had a separate commitment and couldn't be here, he called me specifically to let you guys know that how much he values your contributions and the work that you all do. A lot of times to our community, I can tell you it's probably a lot of work. Most of it's underground, it's unseen. They kind of take it for granted in a way. But the fact that they're taking it for granted shows to the quality and the service that you guys are providing. Because they just assume it's going to work. I don't think they understand all the work and dedication that goes into it and to keep it running. And we all know that water scarcity for development and for the future and growth of our region is hypercritical. So I appreciate everyone here and everything that you pour into maintaining that for the Rio Grande Valley. Mark, thank you for having me. Thank you.
He's our Mayor Pro Tem, by the way. And next, I want to introduce McAllen Public Utility Board member for 16 years, maybe a little over, maybe a little under, but it's right at about 16 years. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate Mr. Ernie Williams on our board. Just does a fantastic job in how he evaluates the decisions, big and small. He has been a tremendous blessing to McAllen Public Utility and for our community. Out of Louisiana, he even has a guest here who has the authentic Cajun Louisiana accent. So if you want to talk to him, right up here. Former Olympic trials participant. Great. Mr. Williams, come on up and say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. He's actually a Kunash from Louisiana. It's basically what he is. He talks different. I don't even understand him anymore when he talks. I can echo only a lot of the words that Mayor Pro Tem Haddad has mentioned. He's covered a lot of things that are near and dear to my heart about what the utility does. But taking it a little bit before I get to that is thanking the exhibitors that we all have out here. Without the people who supply us the equipment to do the things that the utility does, we'd be hard pressed not to get the job done. So thanks to all the exhibitors. I think this year we had 50 exhibitors, so thank you. And of course, it's been mentioned about thanking our sponsors. Without the sponsors, stuff like this just doesn't happen at all. I feel like walking among giants when I'm around water people. We take it so much for granted, and we always hear the little cliches about, water is life, and all that's true, and that is very meaningful. But I think about water, I think about growth and development, and having good potable water delivered into neighborhoods we take so for granted. We turn that faucet on. We expect it to happen, and we get so complacent about it. But it's people like you that make it happen and make it so. As Commissioner Dodd said, that that's a good thing that we take it for granted. That means you're doing your job really good. But those who are involved in it, like you are, it's not taken for granted. That's for sure. Particularly when you look around and you see what all it takes to make that water come out of the faucet. But to me, it's also about jobs and economic growth. It's residential growth, it's commercial growth, and it's industrial growth, without which there's no jobs, and without jobs, you know what happens with that. But managing the water and treating it like a life support system is so very, very vital and very important. And all the work that you engineers and professional water not stormwater, but wastewater professionals do day in and day out is what keeps the economy going. And we certainly appreciate your being here. We hope you will network. We don't mind criticism. Matter of fact, criticism makes us do our job better. We always want to do the right thing, and sometimes we might get off track and not doing the right thing as we're supposed to, and we like to hear good, positive feedback to keep us on the right track. We're not afraid of it. But we also like compliments. If you like what we're doing, we'd like to hear that also, but we learn from doing things that we're maybe getting off track. We'd like to think of ourselves as a regional water provider. We think we'll continue to do that. And as David Garza, I can't say enough about what David took on last year to take on this project that Mark handed the baton to him and said, here's the idea, go with it. And it just flourished. And that all had to do with about 232 employees as of this morning, thank you, Edith, that we have that are supporting doing these sort of things. So we're glad you're here. We hope you'll enjoy McAllen. We hope you'll, if you have a little spare time, to visit the restaurants and don't check out the grease traps. They've already been checked. Everything good in that area. But we're glad to hear. May God bless you and be safe while you're here, and thank you for coming.
It's pretty sad, right? 28 years old and I need reading glasses. Maybe I don't. No, so now, yes, and I forgot to thank you so much for thanking the vendors. So many vendors. So that's the vision. Any of y'all familiar with WEFTEC? The vision is WEFTEC RGV Utility Conference right here, okay? Tough crowd. Tough crowd. Okay, a lot of y'all haven't been to WEFTEC, obviously. So we're going to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Sonny Hinojosa, who you all know, without our source, what's our source product? Raw water. And without that, we are helpless. And he was on the Hidalgo County Irrigation District Number 2 as general manager for many, many years, and really helped us many times in his reliable delivery of raw water to our reservoirs. And maybe some of you all in here, I don't know, but I'm going to read off. There's a lot of things that Sonny is involved with. We cut it down a little bit for the sake of time, or we'd be here till this afternoon. But I'm going to read a little bio for him. Sonny Hinojosa has dedicated more than 40 years to water and ag management in South Texas. He began his career with the U.S. Department of Agriculture as a soil and range conservationist, and later served as Assistant Rio Grande Water Master with the Texas Water Commission. For nearly 3 decades, he led Hidalgo County Irrigation District Number 2 as General Manager, and today continues his service as the district's Rio Grande Water Advocate. Throughout his career, Mr. Hinojosa has held leadership roles in key organizations, including serving as past president of both the Lower Rio Grande Valley Water District Managers Association and the Texas Irrigation Council, as well as vice chair of the Rio Grande Regional Water Planning Group. His contributions have been recognized with the Texas A&M University Vice Chancellor's Award in Excellence and the Service to Agriculture Award from the Hidalgo County Farm Bureau. Active in his community, Mr. Hinojosa is a 3-time Paul Harris Fellow with the Edinburgh Rotary and continues to advocate for responsible water use and conservation in the Rio Grande Valley. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Sonny Hinojosa. Thank you all.
There you go. Mark, thank you for the introduction. You make me feel real old now. And like you, I do need reading glasses. Thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. I have been involved in water for almost 4 decades. And I've never considered myself much of a speaker, but I am passionate about the Rio Grande. And that's been what I've been involved with since my career with what used to be the Water Commission and then the Irrigation District Number 2. You mentioned I was a USDA range conservationist. That was my passion. Water got in the way, and I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. But in the meantime, I do know the Rio Grande. And the Rio Grande is the only source of fresh water for this area. We do have groundwater, but it is costly, of course, to utilize it when we can rely most of the time on the surface water from the Rio Grande. So to get started, a little history on where our water comes from. The area that you see that's delineating, this area, that is the Rio Grande Basin. Any water, rainfall that falls in this area should eventually make its way into the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande starts where the headwaters is in the state of Colorado. It meanders through New Mexico, and in New Mexico is where we see one of the first major reservoirs. That's Elephant Butte, which is around this area. Elephant Butte captures the snowpack from Colorado and northern New Mexico, and they only release sufficient water to meet the needs of the El Paso Valley. Below El Paso, there's hardly any flow in the Rio Grande. In fact, that stretch from Fort Quitman down to Presidio is referred to as the forgotten reach of the Rio Grande. That reach rarely has any water flow. In fact, when I first started with the Water Master's office, I was given a tour of the Rio Grande, and the International Bounty and Water Commission was rechannelizing the Rio Grande above Presidio. There was no water, and heavy equipment was present, digging out the channel. The boundary markers were there, but there was no river. So lo and behold, we get a rainfall event, And with the berms they had created with the spoil, the water couldn't get back into the river. So all that water stayed outside for a few months. But nonetheless, a few facts about the basin of how large it is: 335,500 square miles, and about a little less than half of this area of the basin contributes no runoff to the Rio Grande. Being that we don't get any water from upstream, the most productive part of the Rio Grande watershed is on the Mexican side of the river. 3/4 of our water below El Paso comes in from the Mexican side. And I believe that is for that reason we have the 44 treaty that allows us, through that treaty, to receive water from Mexico. A few facts about the Rio Grande as far as the size of it, but when the Rio Grande reaches El Paso, it forms the international boundary between the United States and Mexico. That is 1,254 miles. And then our uppermost reservoir is in close to Del Rio, that's Amistad. It's at 574 miles. Marco, I'm like you, I need my reading glasses. And then, of course, we have our lowermost reservoir by Zapata, which is Falcon. That's 262 miles from the Gulf. The first international reservoir that was constructed was Falcon, and that is located by Zapata. And both international reservoirs were constructed for the purpose of flood control, conservation, and the generation of hydroelectric power. This dam was completed construction in 1954, and the important aspects of this dam is that it sits 150 feet above the riverbed, and the elevation of 301.2 above mean sea level is at conservation capacity, and when it is full, it has a surface area of 87,000 acres. This reservoir can store 2.66 million acre feet of water, and the U.S. share of it, because we share it with Mexico, is 1,562,000 acre feet. The second reservoir that was constructed is Amistad, located by Del Rio. Once again, the same purpose: flood control, conservation of water, and the generation of hydroelectric power. It sits 254 feet above the riverbed, and when full at elevation of 1,117 feet above mean sea level, it covers a surface area of 87,000 acres. So when you compare this to Falcon, Falcon's 100 feet shallower, yet 20,000 acre feet broader in surface area. We try to keep most of our water upstream at Amistad for the reduction in evaporative losses. So when this reservoir is full at 1117 feet above mean sea level, it can store 3.2 million acre feet of water, and the U.S. share of that is 1.8 million. So these two reservoirs store all the water that we use here in the Rio Grande Valley. Both reservoirs are considered one system, and the international dams and their structures are regulated and operated by the International Boundary Water Commission and their counter agency in Mexico, the Comisión Internacional de Límites y Aguas, otherwise known as SILA. But each country manages its share of water, and on the U.S. side, that responsibility falls in the state of Texas, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the Rio Grande Water Master. So a recap of the reservoirs is Falcon can store 2.6 million. The United States share is 1.56. Amistad can store 3.2 million acre feet. U.S. share is 1.8. So our total capacity of storage in these two reservoirs is 3,375,796 acre feet. The water within the state of Texas on the Rio Grande is distributed by two treaties. The first is the Convention between the United States and Mexico. the equitable distribution of the waters of the Rio Grande, and this treaty was signed in 1906, often referred to as the 1906 Convention. The second treaty is the one on the right, and that is the utilization of waters of the Colorado and Tijuana rivers and of the Rio Grande. This was executed in 1944. Everyone knows this treaty as the 1944 Water Treaty. The Convention of '06 distributes the water between El Paso and Fort Quitman, Texas. The United States delivered 60,000 acre-feet of water to Mexico at Juarez. And in exchange for this 60,000 acre-foot delivery, annual delivery, Mexico waives any claims to water from below El Paso down to Fort Quitman. So any water that gets to the gauging station at Fort Quitman is 100% United States. The 1944 treaty distributes the water between Fort Quitman and the Gulf of Mexico. And what this treaty states is, and this is just a copy of the treaty page itself, is that the United States gets all the inflows from 7 tributaries on the U.S. side, and they're mentioned up here. The Pecos and the Devils, Good Enough Spring that flows directly into Amistad Reservoir. Then we have the Terlingua and Alamito creeks in this area, in the Big Bend. And then we have the Pinto and San Felipe creeks, which come in between Eagle Pass and Del Rio. We also get 1/2 of the other flows from any unmeasured tributaries. And then the most important part is probably this bottom part, Part C, where the United States gets 1/3 of the flows that reach the main channel of the Rio Grande from 6 tributaries in Mexico, those being the Rio Conchos, and that's the one that comes in at Presidio, Ojinaga. That is the most productive of the 6 tributaries in Mexico. So we get 1/3 of the flows that reach the main channel from the Rio Conchos, the San Diego, San Rodrigo, Escondido, and Salado rivers. The Salado comes in straight into Falcon Reservoir, and the Arroyo Las Vacas. And the treaty goes on to read that we get 1/3, provided this third is not less as an average amount in cycles of 5 consecutive years than 350,000 acre-feet annually. And the word average is what really messes this up. You know, the treaty, the 44 treaty, distributes the waters on the Rio Grande, which is on the east side of the Continental Divide, but it also distributes the water of the Colorado and Tijuana rivers, which is on the western side of the Continental Divide. The Colorado relies on snowpack, snowmelt. On the Rio Grande side, being the most productive part of the watersheds in Mexico, it relied on rainfall. And we all know rainfall cannot ever be the same. It's not as reliable as snowpack. So Mexico is given 5 years to deliver to the United States as an average of 350,000 acre-feet per year. The treaty goes on to read that in the event of an extraordinary drought or serious accident to the hydraulic system on the measured tributaries from Mexico, that makes it difficult for them to deliver the 350,000 acre-feet annually, that any deficiencies in those deliveries would be made up in the next 5-year cycle. And that's where we are today. We just ended a 5-year cycle with Mexico, October 24th. Mexico was in arrears, so that deficit now becomes a debt. The next paragraph talks about when a new cycle ends and when a new one starts. When the United States conservation capacity at both reservoirs, which is 3,375,000, when those conservation capacities fill, a cycle ends, all debts are considered paid, and a new cycle begins. And I stress that point because the reservoirs don't have to fill, only the U.S. conservation capacity. So it could happen that we get a storm in Texas that brings in water from our tributaries and fills our storage up and lets Mexico off the hook. that could happen. It hasn't happened, but it could. So anyway, those are the main parts of the treaty where Mexico should deliver to U.S. a minimum of 350,000 acre-feet annually. They have 5 years to do so. And you'll see shortly that that hasn't happened very often. There was a minute 234 that was written in 1969, 68 or 69, and that addressed how Mexico would address a deficit in deliveries when the first 5-year cycle ended. Mexico are supposed to deliver that water along with staying current with their current annual deliveries. But that minute, 234, could only be implemented on the second 5-year cycle. So the previous IBWC commissioner, Commissioner Giner, saw in that second year that Mexico was not delivering to the United States the set volume of water. So she started working on a minute to try to make some of these provisions that were in minute 234 available to be used in the first 5-year cycle. And she succeeded. It took her a while, but about a year ago, November 7th of 2024, Mexico can now assign any part of their 2/3 flow, because Mexico has 2/3, we get 1/3. Mexico can assign any part of their 2/3 flow to the United States, and they can also transfer water in storage at Amistad and Falcon to the United States. So that was already in place in 234, but now it can be used in the first 5-year cycle. What was new is that this included the Rio San Juan and Rio Alamo. These two rivers flow into the Rio Grande right upstream of Rio Grande City. Any inflows that are dedicated to the United States for our use can now, if we divert that water, it can be used as treaty credit for Mexico. So that helped Mexico out, and it got us out of a bind earlier this year. But nonetheless, this is a graphic from the International Boundary Water Commission of how the cycle ended. Each of these columns is 1 year in a 5-year cycle. The red diagonal line is a delivery of 350,000 acre-feet per year. The black line is what Mexico was delivering to the United States. You can see that for the first couple of years, there was hardly any inflows. Then there was a tropical system, Invest 98L, that brought some water in, and this jump in deliveries is not anything that Mexico did. This is water that fell below the lowermost reservoir, lowermost dam on each of those 6 tributaries. So then everything just continued after that storm, just barely creeping up. And then Mexico, through pressure from our State Department, offered water to the United States from the Rio San Juan. So we accepted an initial offer. I think it was about 120,000 acre-feet. And that's why you start seeing the stair step. Every week that we took water, Mexico was getting credit for treaty deliveries. And then on April 28th, there was a meeting with our State Department and IBWC and Mexico. And they came to an agreement that they would start transferring water to Amistad, plus they assigned 50% of the flows from those 6 tributaries to the United States. That's why we start seeing the incremental stair steps up until October 24th. In that agreement, Mexico had estimated that they would deliver between 324,000 to 420,000 acre-feet between April 28th and October. So it appeared that Mexico's target was to meet the minimum delivery, and Mexico said they would do that if they received sufficient rainfall. So they made good with the minimum end of their, I guess, compromise. So we start this year, this new cycle, with this deficit. It carried forward. Mexico only delivered 884,864 acre-feet out of the 1.75 million, and the 1.75 million comes from 350,000 acre-feet per year over a 5-year period. So Mexico was in arrears when this cycle ended, 865,000 acre-feet. So now that deficit becomes a debt for the new cycle that started October 25th. So Mexico must present a plan to deliver that water, as well as continuing their minimum contribution of 350,000 acre feet per year. This is a historical cycle deliveries. And what's important here is that Mexico started becoming short on their deliveries since 1992, at least that cycle anyway. So we're looking at 11 5-year cycles here. Not all of them were full 5 years, but you can note that 6 of these ended in a deficit. For the exception of, I think this line, this red one, that was in 2020. Mexico was behind in their deliveries, but they did have sufficient water in storage at Amistad and Falcon, so they transferred water 3 days before the deadline, just so they wouldn't end that cycle in a deficit. I mentioned that the shortage in deliveries started in that cycle of 1992 to 97 because some people claim that the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement is what caused Mexico to start shortchanging the United States of their water. What NAFTA did was the North American Free Trade Agreement, it eliminated the tariffs on about 50% of the goods brought in from Mexico, and there's a provision that 10 years later, all tariffs would be eliminated. So since that time, we have been short of receiving water from Mexico, and what Mexico did was, and I was around back 25 years ago when Mexico defaulted from 1992 to 97. They didn't deliver what they should have. From 97 to 2002, they didn't deliver the debt nor the water they should have. And the deficit was about 1.3 to 1.4 million acre feet. So Susan Combs was our ag commissioner back then, and she requested data from NASA, and they had infrared imagery basically only in the state of Chihuahua, because that was our biggest contributor to the Rio Grande, was the Rio Conchos. And what those images showed was that Mexico, because they had claimed extraordinary drought, that they didn't have water, because we were not receiving data from Mexico at that time. However, the satellite imagery showed that Mexico, instead of showing up red, the heat of the land, it was no red at all, because Mexico was irrigating. They were irrigating with water that should have rightfully been released into the Rio Grande. So we believe that continues today, and that NAFTA is a big contributor to our water shortages. This is just an example of what's going on in Mexico, and this is an area just south of the Big Bend. There's a tributary, it's unmeasured, but the confluence is right south of Redford, Texas. But you can see all the center pivots that have been constructed in the last 22 years. On the left-hand side, you see very little agriculture, and then 22 years later, all those round circles are center pivots. So just as an example of what Mexico has done in the last 20 years, expand their irrigated agriculture. This data is from the University of California, Davis. The left-hand side shows the 6 tributaries that we are entitled to receive 1/3 of the flows from. Las Vacas, San Rodrigo, San Diego, Escondido, Salado, Rio Conchos, prior to the treaty being signed, and then after NAFTA was executed. Most of these tributaries, there's not much difference in what they've been contributing to the Rio Grande, but you can see the disparity from the Rio Conchos. The blue being before the treaty was signed, and the light blue being after NAFTA. So we're getting considerably less water from the Rio Conchos than we used to get before the treaty was signed. Before NAFTA was signed. This graph shows how much water, and this is the purple line I'm talking about. This purple line is how much water Mexico has stored in their reservoirs in those 6 tributaries that, once again, we're entitled to receive inflows from. This is the storm that I talked about earlier, Invest 92L. It took Mexico from this point to almost 3 million acre feet, 2.966 million acre feet. They gained 2.238 million acre feet from that one storm. That storm also boosted Mexico's storage in the international reservoirs, which is the green line, and this is what Mexico has contributed to the United States. But importantly here is that Mexico gained all this water in August of 2022, yet they didn't release any water to the United States. Mexico does not release water to the U.S. What they do is they rely on rainfall that falls below the lowermost reservoir that we're entitled to 1/3 flows from. So since that time, when they had almost 3 million acre feet, 2 years later, they have used 2.2. They gained 2.38, and they've used 2.2 of it. They got down pretty low, and then earlier this summer, is their monsoon season, they almost doubled their storage. They're almost up to 1.5 million acre feet in those 6 tributaries. So part of that agreement that was executed April 28th with the State Department of Mexico, we started out by Mexico giving us half of the flows instead of the 1/3, but they did designate one tributary, the Rio Conchos, where they gave the United States 100% of the flows. And once they felt that they were getting close to that minimum quantity that they had agreed to, they shut their releases off from Luis Leon. Luis Leon is the lowermost reservoir on the Rio Conchos, and those flows have ceased. This map is a map of the dams that are constructed in Mexico. Prior to 44, Mexico had 3 dams. They had La Boquilla, which is the largest on the Rio Conchos. They had San Miguel. It's a small reservoir, but nonetheless, it was already constructed before 44. And Venustiano Carranza, that empties straight into Falcon Reservoir. These 3 reservoirs were the only ones in place when Mexico signed the treaty in 44. Since then, they have constructed 8 additional reservoirs, and those are the ones that are outlined in red. 8 reservoirs that Mexico has constructed, once again, on the Rio Conchos, the most productive water tributary on the Rio Grande. So Mexico increased their storage capability from 3 million to just a little shy of 4 million acre feet. Once again, not releasing any water to the U.S. Mexico has constructed these dams and reservoirs. They're capturing the water that used to rightfully flow down those tributaries into the Rio Grande, and we would benefit from that water, 1/3 of it. And when we get 1/3, the recipient of the 2/3 is our friend across the river here, Tamaulipas. So they're the ones that benefit from that 2/3 flow. Chihuahua keeps their water upstream. This is where we currently are. These 3 lines indicate where we are today, which is at 26.8%, 906,000 acre feet. The blue line is last year, where we hit our historic low in our storage. We got down to 18%, 612,000 acre feet. And the previous year in gray, and that's when we started our decline in our storage. So we previously had 1998 in here, and that was our previous historic low, and we beat that low, which is nothing to be proud of, but we beat that last June, or 2 Junes ago. So we have 906,000 acre feet, which is a lot better than where we were, but still not enough water. We utilize about 1 million acre feet a year, and we have less than a year's supply. But once again, the river is dynamic. As we extract water, water is always flowing. But nonetheless, that's where we are. So in order to divert water from the river, you must have a water right. And the water rights are administered by the state of Texas, the TCEQ. And these types of water rights include irrigation, mining, domestic, municipal, industrial, recreation, and hydroelectric. The recreational hydroelectric are non-consumptive, but the other groups, of course, do consume the water. But of these various types of use, only the irrigation and mining accounts have storage capability in the reservoir system. The domestic, municipal, industrial water rights draw their water from the DMI reserve. They're often referred to as paper rights, the domestic, municipal, industrial rights. So once the United States is told by the IBWC how much water that is impounded in Amistad and Falcon, they report that figure to the water master, and a water period ends on the last Saturday of each month. So the water master performs this calculation every month, and the first thing that's done is they deduct the dead storage. Dead storage is the volume of water that can't escape the dam. It is below the lowermost outlet. This figure should be 4,600 acre feet, but the U.S. has the lowest outlet that would designate that 4,600 acre foot volume. However, the gate on that hollow jet is inoperable. So we had to raise the dead storage to the next lowest gate, which is Mexico's gate. So that volume of water behind the dams that can't escape is 18,394 acre feet. Next in the calculation is the deduction of 280,000 acre feet to reestablish the domestic, municipal, and industrial reserve. Once again, that figure should be 225,000. But when we hit that historic low, June of 2024, the water master took an emergency action and raised that storage to 280,000 acre feet, and that still remains today. So once we get the volume of water, we deduct the 280,000 acre feet after the dead storage. The next step in that calculation is the end of month storage balances for all the Class A and Class B water rights, your irrigation and mining. Everyone has a water right, has an account. We have stored water in that account. That volume is deducted from the total volume. After that is a 75,000 acre foot deduction for operational reserve. That's kept there for conveyance evaporative losses. And in that calculation, if there's water left over after you run these numbers, then it can be allocated to the Class A and B accounts. An example of it would be, and I'm using the last report that we have. Like I said, the period ends on the last Saturday of each month, and although October ended on the 25th, that's last Saturday of the month, it takes the water master a couple of weeks. So their target to get us their monthly report is the mid-month following the end of a month. So September 27th is the most current report. At that time, U.S. had 910,713 acre feet, which is 26.98% of what we could have. So they deduct the dead storage, 18,394, reestablish the DMI reserve, 280,000, the storage balances from the Class A and B accounts, 468,000, and then the 75,000 acre foot operational reserve. And there was 69,000 acre feet left over after that computation, so it was allocated to the Class A and B accounts. Now, the operational reserve can fluctuate. If there's insufficient water to meet the 75,000, it can go all the way down to zero. But if you ever get to zero water left over after the previous deductions, then you implement a negative allocation where you take water from irrigation and mining to reestablish the operational reserve, and it doesn't just come back up to zero, it goes up to 40,000 acre feet. And that has only been accomplished once in the water master history. So this is the same data, just a different format, where both reservoirs are considered one pool of water. Mexico storage, 2.5 million acre feet, US 3.75. On that date, September 27th, Mexico had 191,463 acre feet at Amistad and Falcon. US had 910,000. When you deduct all the different pools, you can see what's left for agriculture, 537,000 acre feet. agriculture bears the brunt of any shortages. The municipal reserve is always there every month. A year's use is there every single month. However, ag, we use 1 million acre feet on a regular rainfall year. You can see we only have half of that water right now. So ag has been short on water. This is our third year. Really, there's no relief in sight for this year. We're almost done with this year. And not much promise of anything. Hurricane season came and went, and neither Mexico or Texas received any storms. This slide is pretty busy, but what I wanted to highlight, this is the last 16 years worth of data. The year on the left-hand side, the different types of use on the top. What I highlighted was 2011. And I highlighted because that we used the most water. We used 1.5 million acre feet that year. If you recall, 2011 and 2012 were extremely dry in Texas. In fact, the entire state was red on the drought monitor map. Irrigation used 1.2 million acre feet, total use 1.5. The reason we were able to use that much water that year was because in 2010, we had Hurricane Alex and Tropical Depression number 2. They were about 2 weeks apart. They came into Mexico, filled all their reservoirs up, spilled over, came in, filled up Falcon and Amistad. So we started out with over 100% capacity for 2011, which is an extremely dry year. And we used 1.2 million acre feet. 12 was just as dry. We used 1 million. And by the third year, 2013, we were already running short on water. We only used 716,000 acre feet for agriculture. And then the inverse occurs. We have 2015, extremely wet year. We received over 40 inches of rain at our records here in San Juan. And you can see what impact it has on agriculture. We used 300 or less than 346,000 acre feet that year. And the total use for all the uses for that year was less than 585,000 acre feet. Now people ask sometimes, what is a normal year? What do we need? And a good year to reference is 2019. In 2019, we went into the spring, which is our heavy irrigation season, with our water supply in the mid-60s, 60% range, and we had just about an inch over our annual or normal rainfall. So ag used, 1 million acre feet. Municipal use hardly ever fluctuates. You can see maybe a high of 273, but municipal use is pretty constant. But nonetheless, on the total volume is what changes, and ag being the biggest user of that water. But if we work with averages, you can see that using all the types of use, that we use just about 1 million acre feet a year, 1,069,000. You will note that 2024, our use is real low for agriculture. It's not because the need isn't there, but once again, we don't have the supply. So we have to just cut back on that use. But just like we extract water from the reservoirs, we also get inflows. It's the same 16-year period, and our record low for inflows was 2012. 11 was dry, and we saw their impact in 2012, where all the tributaries, the creeks, the ponds, stock ponds, all dried up. We just didn't get those inflows into the system. So that was our historic low up until last year, or 2023, I should say. 2023, we only got or received less than 129,000 acre feet of allocations. An allocation occurs when the inflows exceed the reservoir losses. And that's when it's distributed by the water master to the Class A and B accounts. But working on averages, we normally get, 580,000 acre feet on an annual basis. We withdraw 1 million, get 579,000 or almost 580,000 acre feet back. So just to show what that impact is 3,375,796 is our total storage capability, Amistad Falcon. Working with averages, if we used 1,069,000 every year, and once again using an average allocation, we would deduct from our reservoir pool about 490,000 acre feet per year. And based on our storage, that would be about a 6.9 year supply as a snapshot if all things would just cease. I was talking about rainfall and the impacts it has on our use, mainly agriculture. You'll see 2011, 12, and 13. We had 12 inches of rain in 2011, less than 15 inches of rain in 2012, and 14.3 in 2013. And then the inverse 2 years later, 2015, where we got a little over 40 inches of rain. And these are records that we keep here in San Juan. This is just a historical data of when we receive our rainfall here in the Rio Grande Valley. Our wettest month being September, a little over 4 inches. Of course, you have areas like Weslaco that might get 18 inches in one rain event, but nonetheless, as an average, our wettest month is September, followed closely by June of 3.2 inches. So here we are in early November, and historically we get less than about 1.5 inches of rain. December we get less than an inch. The National Weather Service has forecast that a weak La Nina has formed, so that interprets into a warmer than normal and drier than normal cycle. So we're, once again, short water supply. We don't get much rain this time of year. This is going to carry into next year where we get less than an inch. January, same for February, March, and April. Not until the start of the next hurricane season might we hopefully see any relief. I would suspect, and I assume everyone here is from the Rio Grande Valley, and this report shows the balances of your irrigation district. And most of you rely on an irrigation district to deliver your raw water for your treatment. So you should keep a track of how your irrigation district is faring as far as supply. I know 2 years ago, there were 90-day letters sent out by 3 irrigation districts thinking that they might have difficulties delivering water to their municipal water customers. But luckily, that didn't happen. But nonetheless, keep in constant contact with your irrigation district because they're the ones that divert from the river and supply it to the cities. And this is just a map of all the irrigation districts in the Rio Grande Valley. There's 23 districts extending from western Hidalgo County all the way down to Brownsville. So I touched on the forecast a little bit, and this is, of course, NOAA's, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, their 90-day seasonal outlook. So for November, we are, of course, this is precipitation outlook, below normal. That forecast continues to December, January, February, and not until March of 2026 do we get back to an equal chance of precipitation for our area. The West remains dry. So as a recap, once again, we're ending our 3rd year of water shortage. It appears that we're going to commence our 4th year of low water supply. Mexico does have a little bit of water to give. I understand there's supposed to be a meeting this week with the State Department and IBWC and Mexico to see if they come up with a plan on how they intend to make up the deficiency and stay current with the current deliveries. But Mark, that's the picture that we're facing next year. I would be glad to entertain any questions if you have any. Except from Stephen, yeah.
Great presentation, and what's going on with the water delivery here. A lot of that we can't control, but study, a lot of the water that we get through the irrigation system, I might just try to put there all the different irrigation systems there. So farming is possibly going to go out the whole way. Maybe some custom or hobby farming hobby farming that are there. But what our concerns is, how are we going to get our water? A lot of those irrigation districts are going to start hurting for money. They may become insolvent. So do you see them consolidating together, or possibly in the future becoming a big authority there, that a river authority that controls all the water and how it's delivered? What is your vision for the future on how the irrigation districts are going to finally come out of this?
My thought is consolidation or merging, and it's happened through time. We see the smaller districts that are consumed by larger districts or neighboring districts, and I expect that to continue. Now, there has been talk about a super district or an authority overseeing all the irrigation districts. I see that as a difficult task to accomplish, but I do envision the merging and consolidation of districts.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you much.
Technical question, Sonny. I noticed in the consumption spreadsheet you showed, or the utilization spreadsheet, that the domestic consumption is continually decreasing in general. What is the purpose of a domestic right? Because we have municipal rights. I know what an industrial right is, but domestic rights, I mean, what is the purpose of a domestic right in the system?
The domestic rights came into play back before the development, when there were a lot of rural areas, and irrigation districts would deliver possibly once a week and fill an individual's storage tank. They didn't have potable water, so they had to rely on raw water for their household needs. So there were a lot of domestic rights in the past, and you'll see that use diminish as cities expand their ETJs and water supply corporations cover those areas as well. But yeah, you don't see a whole lot of domestic use anymore.
Is it also used for livestock watering?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hello, sir. For the 1944 treaty on the act that we have sharing the water, is there any consequences for Mexico not releasing water if they share not to?
No, sir, unfortunately there isn't, and that's been a big criticism of the 44 treaty, and rightfully so. It has no teeth. There's no penalty for noncompliance. Of course, the comment you always hear is Mexico would have never agreed to enter into this treaty had there been penalty provisions. So right now the talk is to incorporate the 1944 treaty into the renegotiation of the USMCA, the United States, Mexico, Canada Free Trade Agreement. Basically, that's what it replaced NAFTA. So, and we met with Congresswoman De La Cruz yesterday, and she is pushing that because she feels that if we can incorporate the 44 treaty into the USMCA, then it would give our federal government some levers that they could utilize to force Mexico into compliance. If we can perhaps limit the trade or impose tariffs or embargoes, something to force Mexico to deliver this water. So yes, I appreciate the question because I forgot to mention that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you much.
Okay, real quick, just about 10 years ago, I know that the cost for water rights, for purchase for municipal water rights, was about maybe $2,000 per acre foot. Today, it's probably around $3,000. How do you see that trend for the next 5-10 years?
You would think that water would become more valuable. We just don't see a big jump in that. It's all supply and demand. Right now, irrigation rights are always continuously being traded, and what you hear out there is, why would I want to buy an irrigation right that has no water? Well, someday it will, but as far as the value, it's just slowly been creeping up. we have some of the cheapest water in the United States. When we're always compared to California, where their costs are exorbitant, and I hope we never get there. But thank you for bringing up the price, because, you know, we as irrigation districts try to keep water as inexpensive as possible to help out our farmers. However, if the price of water starts going up, and I know you're talking about rights, but the cost of water, it's going to impact basically our row crops. It'll change our crop mix, put it that way, because you have grain, sorghum, and cotton as our annual crops that are grown in the spring, big water users. If it gets too expensive, and they're not big profitable crops, if water gets too expensive, you'll probably see that go away and come in with higher value crops, which are your vegetables. So, you know, economics dictates that as well as the development. So, you know, in the big picture, and as I mentioned to you a couple of days ago, I'll borrow our legal counsel's term of, at the end of the day, when there's no more agriculture and everything is urbanized and developed, all of the water in the reservoirs will be domestic municipal industrial rights. And, you know, historically, there was a study accomplished several years ago that reflected that the lowest inflows ever recorded for the U.S. were 700,000 acre feet. And when our DMI use is 280,000 acre feet, and that it's going to continue to grow, we do need, and of course we got 3.3 million of storage. So we should not experience any shortages for DMI use, but we still have to get Mexico to comply. Now, we have those 7 tributaries on the U.S. side, on the Texas side, that aren't contributing as much anymore either. However, we pick on Mexico because we have a law, we have a treaty with Mexico that they should be delivering. We don't have anything with the state of Texas saying that, hey, those tributaries should be delivering X amount. In fact, Commissioner Giner, when she was still in office, you know, brought that to our attention. It's like, yeah, you're not getting water from Mexico, but you're not getting it from the U.S. either. And when you use 1 million acre feet a year, and you're relying on 350,000 from Mexico, that difference is either water and storage or inflows from the Texas side. So we've got TCQ looking into that. Hopefully we get some kind of response from them as far as where did the water go. People like to cite climate change. Well, we just saw that slide from University of California, Davis, where Mexico can't cite climate change except for that one tributary. And we attribute that use or reduction in inflows to the passage of NAFTA. It's too much of a coincidence that in 1994, inflows ceased. And that river ceased to contribute to the Rio Grande. So we have that Forgotten Rivers reach from Fort Quitman to Presidio, and if that doesn't change, we're going to see the Big Bend dry up, which we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years. You know, zero flow coming down the Big Bend. And that's not good for the environment or for the health of the river. We need to have Mexico comply with the terms of the treaty. Yes, sir.
Hey, Sonny, for Lake Amistad, I understand that the penstock structure was needing repair. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah. That was it went out for bid, and it was supposed to have been repaired by March of this year, and I didn't follow up on it. And they used to keep something on their website, but it did not happen. I don't know what the rationale was, that, you know, the excuse, but it has not been repaired, and I don't know when it would be repaired. But that's the bottom of the reservoir. Yes, sir.